case is about Star Hobson, who was born on the 21st of May 2019. Her parents were Frankie Smith and Jordan Hobson, a teenaged mother. Smith was a month short of her 18th birthday at the time of her daughter's birth. In November that year, Star's parents separated and her mother formed a relationship with Savannah Brookhill, a club bouncer. On the 27th of January 2020, a friend of Smith made a referral to social services about Star's welfare. A social worker later visited the baby twice. During February, Brookhill sent a video to Smith's sister, speculating that Smith may have cheated on her and calling herself a psycho who would stab someone tonight. Smith got her own flat at around the time that the UK went into lockdown in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Brookhill being violent towards Smith on at least 2 occasions during that month, and at one point Brookhill told an acquaintance that she had considered driving them both off a cliff. Social services closed their case on Star at about this time, but it was reopened in May when her grandmother learned that Brookhill had been using wrestling moves to restrain the toddler with no intervention from Smith. Her referrals, including by Star's father, were made in June, and the girl was given a medical examination, but the case was again closed the next month. The case was briefly reopened again after a referral by Star's grandfather, but closed when her bruising was explained as being due to a fall. Later that month, CCTV footage captured Brookhill assaulting the child at her workplace in a recycling plant, and Smith, who participated in the abuse of her daughter, dragging an unwell-looking Star through the town on her reins. Star was physically unable to walk by this time due to a broken leg. On the 22nd of September, Star was playing with 2 other children at home when she was severely assaulted. According to the later legal verdict, through a fatal punch or kick delivered with the force of a car crash. The couple made internet searches relating to treating shocking babies 15 minutes prior to making a 999 call. The fatal assault to her abdomen damaged her internal organs. She had other older injuries, which included a fractured ankle and skull. High Court Judge the Honourable Mrs. Justice Christina Lambert, DBE, will be the judge in this case. Savannah Brookhill and Frankie Smith have both been charged with the murder of 16-month-old Star Hobson and also with causing or allowing her death. Brookhill, 28, of Hawthorne Close, Keighley, and Smith, 20, of Wesley's Place, Halifax Road, Keighley, have both denied all charges against them. Leading the prosecution will be Alistair MacDonald. Defending Savannah Brookhill is Kath Goddard, while for Frankie Smith is Zavar Ali. Alistair MacDonald is now beginning the prosecution's opening of the case. He said, at 3:45 p.m. on Tuesday, September the 22nd, 2020, a 999 call was made, and when paramedics arrived at the flat where the call had been made, they discovered the body of an apparently lifeless pale baby wearing only a disposable nappy. She was a waxy grey and breathing shallowly, and they had concerns for her life. She was in need of emergency medical attention from specialist doctors, and there was little they could do at the scene. They took Star Hobson to Airedale Hospital by ambulance. When they got into the ambulance, her breathing stopped and they began CPR. When they did that, Star vomited large amounts of brown material. She had also suffered a cardiac arrest. They put a needle in to deliver drugs to restart her heart and got her to hospital as fast as possible. Emergency clinicians did everything they could to save her, but they could not, and she was pronounced dead later that afternoon, aged 16 months. The injuries she had suffered were so catastrophic there was no way they could save her. The call was made at 3:45 and she was pronounced dead at about 5 p.m. A number of Google searches were made at 3:34 p.m. about shock in babies, and one search read, how to bring a baby out of shock. There was a 15-minute gap between the first search and the call for help to 999. This is a long gap for a child who was seriously injured, and to wait that long to call for help when the child is in a medical catastrophe, when any normal caregiver would have called in an instant. We say this shows each of these defendants has something to hide. It was only when they tried to revive her and failed to do so given the catastrophic, unsurvivable nature of her injuries, shows these were caused non-accidentally and both defendants were involved. The flat was very small, and the only adults present when these injuries occurred were these two women who had cared for Star in the last months of her short life. There are two bedrooms of a corridor, and the room at the end of the corridor is the sitting room, the room where Star Hobson suffered her injuries, Mr. McDonald says. The jury are now seeing the main bedroom in the flat, which features a bed, some furniture, and contains a pushchair. In the second bedroom, Star's bedroom, are a number of toys. The bathroom is right next to the living room, which Mr. McDonald says is important. The jury are now being shown the living room, which contains two black sofas, a coffee table, large windows, and a dining table. Also leads to the kitchen further into the flat. The table area is where Star suffered her injuries. They are also shown the kitchen, which is right next to the living room, which is important because that's where Brooke Hill says she was when she heard noise from the living room. Each defendant admits being in the flat when Star suffered her injuries. Star was in the living room. Smith says she was in the bathroom, and Brooke Hill says she was in the kitchen. Brooke Hill said she heard a bang and found Star on the floor next to the table lying on her back, and as she entered the room, Star was all floppy and had brown vomit coming from her mouth. She said she smacked Star 3 times on the bottom to try and help, but she was sick again. She told Smith to get a towel to waft in her face. A post-mortem was performed on Star by expert child pathologists who will give evidence during the trial, and other highly specialist opinions were also sought into a brain expert. These examinations reveal in the course of her short life, Star had suffered a number of significant injuries at different times. First, the fatal injuries, the main vein carrying blood back to the hair, had been lacerated or torn, allowing large amounts of blood into the abdominal cavity. There was a split to the liver and damage to fatty areas of the bowel, bruising on the lungs and pancreas, and all these injuries were caused by a severe and forceful blow or blows caused by punching, kicking, or stamping to the abdomen of that 16-month child. The impact was immediate, leading to bleeding, causing a catastrophic fall in blood pressure and death within minutes. It's not surprised there was nothing medical staff could do to save Star. Further testing showed fractures to the lower leg of Star by forceful twisting. The first fracture was in process of fixing when it was refractured by the same mechanism. There was also a skull fracture and fractures to the ribs, which was refractured when in the process of healing. During the period of these injuries, Star was in the care of Brooke Hill and Smith, who were partners. She was never taken for care or help for any of these injuries until the fatal injuries. Social services were aware of Star but kept away along with other family members in the latter stages of her life. Star was killed by intentional injuries by people who intended at the very least to cause really serious harm to this innocent little girl. Her death was no accidental death, and this was a case of murder. In addition, both face another lesser charge of causing or allowing her death. In addition to the physical assaults, there was a degree of cruel and psychological harm which will be seen in videos played later. Frankie Smith was the mother of Star Hobson, Mr. McDonald tells the jury, and was 19 at the time of Star's death. Her relationship with Star's father ceased when Star was around 6 months old. Savannah Brooke Hill is considerably older. When Star was born, she lived with Frankie and her mother and had support from Star's great-grandmother. Around December 2019, Smith and Brooke Hill began a relationship after meeting at pubs Smith visited, where Brooke Hill was working on the doors. Back to the relationship. At first, it was an on-off relationship, breaking up one day and back together the next. In the first week of February 2020, Smith was found upstairs crying, saying the relationship was over. At this point, Smith's grandmother looked after Star for 10 weeks, and when they picked her up, she appeared depressed and not the happy baby she had appeared to be at Christmas. She had lost weight and was sore when her nappy was removed, but under their care, Star gained weight and became happier. Then in April, Smith took Star back from them, having seen her a couple of times a week while she had been staying with Smith's grandmother. Brookhill had not seen Star at any point during this time. Star was with her great-grandparents until the end of April 2020 and had greatly improved. On June the 20th, a photo of Star was shown to the great-grandfather by one of Star's aunts showing bruises on her face. She posted 2 photos, the bruised one and an earlier one, on Facebook captioned, "From this to this in 5 weeks, what's going on, Frankie?" In one photo she appears happy and uninjured in the first, but has bruises on her face in the second. This may tell you about the love and care to Star that he posted that because he was so concerned about what was happening. He got an answer from Smith which said, "My beautiful child, that's what is going on. Grow up," accompanied by a thumbs up and photo of Star, with another comment asking if he had been doctoring images which later disappeared. Smith then blocked her grandfather on Facebook and blocked his number the first time this had happened. He did see her shortly after when he saw her walking, and then next saw her in August when she was bought by her aunt of Star and a photo put on Facebook. Smith then arrived in a taxi and was raging, saying, "Give me the baby. If Savannah finds out, she'll go mad." Before she met Brookhill, Smith didn't care what photos go on Facebook. Her grandmother would play a game with her where she was balanced on her feet and sang to, but after that she would scream like she was in pain, and that was when bruises were seen. A video is now being shown to the court in which bruises can be seen on the cheek of Star, taken by someone concerned for the welfare of Star and trying to help. Star's great-grandfather saw that video, and during a phone call he asked Brookhill why whenever Star was with her she was covered in bruises. Brookhill answered, "All children get bruises." He said when Star stayed with her she never had bruises, and asked why Frankie also had bruises and was not a child, at which point Brookhill hung up the phone. He had seen bruises on Smith's neck and arms. The last time Star's great-grandfather saw her was in August when he said she was back looking like a pressed baby. Star's great-grandmother said Frankie was struggling as a new mother. The experience of Star was a happy, inquisitive baby who liked having fun, and they were smitten with her. She lived in a happy environment before Smith took her back in April. The great-grandfather discovered on that day Brookhill's car was at Smith's mother's house. Star's great-grandmother only saw Star 3 more times after Smith took her back. Brookhill had been using a slam choke on Star, where she picked her up by her neck and slammed her onto the bed. Star's great-grandmother said she was horrified by this. Brookhill said it was to toughen up Star. Her great-grandparents were really worried about the condition of Star. In June 2020, Smith rang her grandmother and was concerned Star could not stand up or walk. Her great-grandmother, Annetta, saw she was crawling when she had previously walked unaided and was going backwards. Annetta had told Smith to leave Brookhill, but she would not listen. After beginning a relationship with Brookhill, Smith began speaking and dressing differently, and was seen regularly with black eyes. They told her she didn't have to put up with it, but told her grandparents she didn't feel the pain. Mr. McDonald is now speaking about Rebecca Lee Gorman, Smith's best friend. He said she assisted with looking after Star and doing night feeds. She had concerns over a period of time about how Smith was being treated by Brookhill, with bruises on her back when the pubs reopened in the summer of 2020. When she was asked about the bruises, she said Brookhill had given her them but nothing more, meaning she was in trouble. She saw her with black eyes, which Smith said Brookhill had given her them and didn't know why. Smith got the Wesley Place flat and Brookhill was spending a lot of time there. She met Smith, Brookhill and Star at a local Weatherspoons and offered to feed Star as she hadn't been eating for days. At this point, Brookhill took Star and made her stand in the corner facing the wall and told her off. She was forced to stand there for 5 minutes. This business was a commonly used punishment. We have video footage of this happening. The court is being shown a video of Star being made to crawl upstairs to the flat while crying and being filmed. When in the flat, she is told to stand at the wall repeatedly. Star is crying throughout while being followed and filmed and told aggressively to stand at the wall. Family members in the public gallery are visibly upset by the footage, with one person having to leave the courtroom due to the upsetting nature of the footage. More videos taken from Smith's phone show Star standing facing a wall and standing in the corner. You'll be wondering what that little girl had done to deserve that. Another video of Smith and Star is being shown where Star is crying and being shooed at by Smith. Star begins crying again and is roughly handled and told to stand in the corner by Smith. Star can barely stand and is carried to the corner by Smith, who shouts at her. Star begins crying and screaming as Smith forces her into the corner to stand facing the wall. Star is then left sat in the corner crying while Smith picks up her phone and shouts at her to get in the corner. There is no hint of love in that video. Miss Lee Gorman said Star was not a naughty baby and was always smiling and happy when she stayed with her. She last saw Star at the bank holiday weekend in August 2020 when she had a large bruise on her left ear and another on her jawline the size of a £1 coin. She rang Smith to ask how they had been caused, who said they were caused when she fell down the stairs in the hallway at home. Smith then showed Miss Gorman bruises and marks on Star's neck, which she did not have when she left Miss Gorman's care. Miss Gorman last saw Star on September the 18th when she seemed okay. Statements from another witness, Holly Jones, are being read. Her, Smith and Star went on holiday to Bridlington that summer, and Miss Jones looked after Star while Smith went out drinking like she didn't have a child. When Star was with Miss Jones, she was a different baby. At Smith's home, she was left in a walker for hours at a time. She was a different baby with Smith than with others. There was a block put on people seeing Star, and Miss Jones saw her occasionally. Miss Jones was in the car with Brookhill and Smith when they got food, but only for the adults, so Miss Jones shared some of hers. Star inadvertently bit Miss Jones' finger and she cried out. Miss Jones was asked what she was going to do about it, and Smith bit Star's finger. After the holiday to Brid, Star went from happy and smiley to a withdrawn baby. She did not hold her while she bottle fed her, and as mentioned, would be left in a walker for hours. Star would be left in her bed until midday, and Miss Jones also noticed Brookhill was taking a controlling role in parenting Star and said Jordan was not the father and she was the parent. She had seen Brookhill threatening violence against Smith. Miss Jones noticed bruising on Star's face, and then Brookhill arrived at her home unexpectedly and took her back. This was when the block was put on people seeing her. Another statement from Natasha Maddox. About a month before Star's death was the first time she had seen her, and immediately noticed the bruises on her ear, cheek, neck, which looked like finger marks. Miss Jones was going to bathe her as she looked dirty, and then Brookhill rang out of the blue to say she was going to pick her up. Smith and Brookhill arrived in Brookhill's car. Jones put Star in the car and they drove off. Miss Maddox said she could not let the bruising go and sent it to Ben Smith. She then got a message on Snapchat from Frankie Smith asking why she had taken a video and not to do it. The next day, Brookhill was messaging asking for the video, and the video was sent, to which Brookhill replied a photo of the stairs. This shows the family dynamics and the serious concerns there were for Star's health and welfare. Now we move on to the medical evidence. First, a post-mortem examination, McDonald said, and he would start at the end, Star's death, and work back to examine the previous injuries Star sustained during her life. Post-mortem found a serious abdominal injury. There was 300 milliliters of blood in the abdominal cavity. A baby Star's age would have 680 milliliters of blood in her body. Half her blood was in her abdominal cavity. A major vein from the bottom half of her body and organs had been severed. There was a laceration to the liver, fatty areas around the bowel, and bruising to the lungs and pancreas. Mr. Johnson said her blood pressure would have dropped very quickly and her circulation would have failed and caused a cardiac arrest shortly afterwards. Observations by paramedics of a pale, lifeless body are consistent with what was found in the post-mortem. Dr. Johnson would have expected her to be floppy and breathing rapidly, and as we have heard, that's exactly what happened. The injury was caused by blunt force trauma from a punch, kick or stamp. The blows were delivered by a severe degree of force. He found nothing in the flat which could have accidentally caused the injuries, and no explanation was provided by either defendant as to what could have caused the injury. Brookhill said she had delivered CPR to Star's abdomen, the wrong area for CPR as it could be done on the chest, but the administering of CPR could not have caused the severity of the injuries. The CPR was delivered after she was found unresponsive and collapsed, meaning something else must have caused these injuries, so incorrectly applied CPR could not have caused these injuries. This was Brookhill's way of trying to explain away the injuries to the abdomen. Only someone who delivered the blows or witnessed them would know she received the fatal injuries to the abdomen. The fatal injuries were caused by these two adult defendants. Mr. Johnson also found a fracture to the back of Star's skull which was 12 centimeters 1 foot long from the bottom of the skull upwards in a Y shape with bleeding around the area. The bone was examined by Professor Magam, who found the fracture was 5 to 10 days old at the time of Star's death. A heavy blow to the back of the head could have caused it when struck against a hard and unwielding surface, such as a floor or wall, or a heavy blow such as a kick to the back of the head. He would have expected a baby to be concussed, and that symptoms of concussion would have been immediately obvious to anyone who saw her. These people restricted access to Star, those who loved and cared for her, people who would have spotted these concussion symptoms. These injuries support that Star had been repeatedly physically assaulted in the weeks leading up to her death. Dr. Duplessis, an expert in brain and spinal cord, found another injury to her brain. He said the abdominal injury would have caused death so quickly that while it would have stopped blood flow to the brain, it did not cause brain damage because she died so quickly. An abnormality in her skin bone was found that she fractured her leg 2 to 4 times before her death, but that bone had been refractured around 3 to 7 days before her death. The bone break was caused by severe twisting motion to the leg and support she had been repeatedly physically assaulted. A baby with a broken leg would be in obvious pain clear to anyone who saw her, and there is evidence she was limping in the weeks prior to her death. There are also injuries to the ribs in the middle of the chest, fractured 2 to 4 weeks before her death, but there had been further traumatic injuries to the same area anywhere between a couple of days and few hours before her death. Substantial areas of bruising were also found by Dr. Johnson, but it is difficult to give a precise age of a bruise, but it is possible to say whether it is fresh or old. Due to appearance and distribution of bruises, the pathologists can give ideas of how they were caused. Toddlers do sustain bruises. They toddle around and sometimes fall, but these bruises went far beyond what he could expect in a child this age, and the pattern of the bruising shows its cause was non-accidental. The bruises were typical fingerprint bruises. He saw a wide number of photos of bruising to Star, some which he can say unequivocally were non-accidental, caused by pinching, prodding, grabbing. There were bruises all over Star's head and a cut to the frenulum, which attaches the top lip to the gum, consistent with a blow to the mouth. Bruises were on her feet and hand, typical to being caused by pinching. Dr. Johnson said she had far too many injuries in different areas of her body, many in unusual locations, all to have an accidental explanation. Mr. McDonald adds, there are carefully chosen words as you would expect from a forensic pathologist. There are a number of distressing videos which will be described and played to the jury. You are the judges of fact in this case, the sole judges of fact. It is your interpretation that matters, and the only way to interpret them is to watch them. The first is from September 13th, 2020. Brookhill worked as a security guard at a recycling plant in South Yorkshire and often took Star in her car. The jury is being shown CCTV of Brookhill and Star at the site on that date, which Mr. McDonald says has been extensively analysed by Dr. Johnson. This will be shown after the lunch break, which is now being called.